From tiny tankettes barely larger than motorcycles to massive self-propelled guns, Italy deployed a remarkably wide range of armored and motorized vehicles across World War II battlefields. This comprehensive examination reveals them all, from the fastest reconnaissance scouts racing across North African sands to the heaviest war machines that shaped the Italian Royal Army's fortunes during 6 years of global conflict. Light tanks. The Fiat 3000 represented Italy's first steps into armored warfare, derived directly from the French Renault FT-17's design from the First World War. First entering Italian service in 1921, this was Italy's first mass-produced tank, built when the concept of armored vehicles was still in its infancy. By the time Italy entered World War II in June 1940, the Fiat 3000 was completely obsolete, hopelessly outclassed by modern armor in every respect. Yet surprisingly, these ancient relics still saw limited action during homeland defense duties in 1943-1945, pressed into service when Italy became a battleground and every available weapon was desperately needed. Next up, the L3/33, among the most common Italian armored vehicles of the entire war. These tankettes were essentially tiny tracked boxes, lightly armored with riveted steel that could barely stop rifle fire and armed with nothing more than twin 8mm machine guns. Italian troops often referred to them grimly as sardine cans due to their cramped two-man crew compartment and terrifying vulnerability to virtually any anti-tank weapon. First introduced in 1933 and refined in 1935, thousands were produced and deployed across every theater where Italy fought: Ethiopia, Spain, Albania, North Africa, the Balkans, and the Eastern Front. While fast and mechanically reliable, they were fundamentally inadequate for modern warfare, offering almost no protection to their crews. The L3LF flamethrower represented a specialized variant of the basic L3 tankette. This version replaced one machine gun with a flamethrower system and towed a vulnerable trailer containing the fuel supply. Despite the obvious danger of towing flammable liquid into combat, it became a terrifying weapon in close-quarters situations. It proved genuinely useful for clearing fortified positions and bunkers during the Ethiopian campaign of 1935-1936, and later during fighting in the Balkans, where its flame could reach into caves and strongpoints that conventional weapons couldn't touch. Moving on to the L3/35, the anti-tank configuration of the diminutive L3 series. This desperate modification fitted the tiny tankette with a single 20mm Solotherm anti-tank rifle protruding awkwardly from the hull. It was a desperate attempt to give these obsolete vehicles some meaningful firepower against enemy armored vehicles as the war progressed and Italian forces faced increasingly capable Allied armor. The modification was only marginally effective. The 20mm weapon could penetrate light armor at close range, but was utterly inadequate against anything heavier.
Next on the list, the L6/40 light tank. Intended to finally replace the ancient and inadequate L3 tankettes, this genuinely new light tank design entered service in 1941. It was armed with a 20mm Breda automatic cannon and a coaxial machine gun in a rotating turret, a significant improvement over the L3's fixed armament. The L6/40 performed adequately in reconnaissance roles, where speed and mobility mattered more than protection or firepower, but it was far outclassed when it encountered Allied medium tanks like the American M4 Sherman or British Crusader. Italian cavalry and reconnaissance units used it throughout North Africa and later in Italy itself. Medium tanks. The M11/39 represented Italy's early attempt at creating a true medium tank. Entering service in 1939, it featured a very unusual and fundamentally flawed design that placed the main 37mm gun in a limited traverse mounting in the hull rather than in a turret. Only a machine gun occupied the small turret. This severely limited the tank's ability to engage targets without exposing its entire hull, making it tactically inflexible.
It saw action during the initial Italian invasion of Egypt in September 1940 and the early North African campaigns, where it proved completely inadequate against British Matildas and American Shermans. It's widely used in North Africa, and some were used in Italy by German security units after the armistice. Next up, the M13/40 medium tank. This became the workhorse of Italian armored divisions throughout the critical North African campaigns from 1940 to 1943. Introduced in 1940 as an improved version of the M11/39, it finally placed the main armament, a 47mm gun, in a proper rotating turret, solving the previous design's fundamental flaw. The M13/40 was mechanically reliable, and its crews praised its handling characteristics. However, it suffered from critically thin riveted armor that had a dangerous tendency to send deadly rivets flying around the interior when struck by high explosive shells, even when the armor wasn't penetrated. British gunners learned that hitting an M13/40 anywhere with HE rounds would likely disable it. Thousands served with Italian armored divisions throughout the Western Desert. The M14/41 was an incremental upgrade of the M13/40 design, entering service in 1941. It featured a slightly more powerful engine that improved speed and reliability in the harsh desert environment. This medium tank saw extensive action throughout the Western Desert Campaign, participating in every major battle from Tobruk to El Alamein. While improvements were made, it still suffered from the fundamental weaknesses of thin armor and inadequate firepower when facing British Matildas and American Shermans. Moving on, the M15/42, the final iteration of the Italian M-series medium tanks. Introduced in 1942, it featured better armor protection and a more powerful version of the 47mm cannon with improved ammunition. The diesel engine was replaced with a more powerful gasoline unit. However, production started tragically late to meaningfully affect the war's outcome. Most M15/42s never reached North Africa before the Axis surrender there in May 1943. The majority served in Italy itself during 1943, with many captured by German forces after the Italian armistice and pressed into Wehrmacht service during the bitter Italian campaign. Heavy tanks. The P-26/40 was designated as a heavy tank by Italian standards, though its actual combat weight and capabilities were closer to contemporary medium tanks from other nations. Entering production in 1943, it was armed with a formidable 75mm gun that finally gave Italian armor respectable firepower. The P-26/40 represented the culmination of Italian tank development, incorporating sloped armor and a powerful engine. Tragically, production was just beginning when Italy signed the armistice in September 1943. Most completed examples were immediately captured by German forces and pressed into Wehrmacht service during the bitter Italian campaign.
Light self-propelled guns. The Semovente da 47/32 was Italy's first serious attempt at a self-propelled gun. Introduced in 1941, this compact vehicle mounted a 47mm anti-tank gun in a low-profile casement built on the chassis of the L6/40 light tank. It was designed to provide Italian infantry divisions with mobile direct fire support and some capability against enemy armor. While the 47mm gun was adequate against early Allied light tanks, it proved increasingly inadequate as the war progressed and heavier armor appeared. Medium self-propelled guns. Moving on to the Semovente da 75-18. This is considered by many historians and veterans to be the best armored fighting vehicle Italy produced during the entire war. Entering service in 1941, it mounted a short-barreled 75mm howitzer in a fully enclosed, low-profile casement built on the reliable M1340 or M1441 tank chassis. Its combination of good mobility,
low silhouette that made it difficult to spot, and powerful high-explosive shells made it a serious threat to Allied forces in North Africa and Italy. Italian crews valued it highly for infantry support, and it proved effective in defensive operations. Next up, the Semovente da 7534. This very useful self-propelled vehicle represented a significant evolution, mounting a longer-barreled 75mm anti-tank gun with much better armor penetration than the earlier 75-18 howitzer. Introduced in 1942, this version was substantially better at engaging enemy tanks at longer ranges, finally giving Italian forces a mobile platform capable of threatening even heavily armored British and American tanks. It served throughout the Italian campaign with both Italian and German forces. The Semovente da 7546 was a late-war variant developed with direct German technical input after Italy's armistice in 1943. It featured an even longer and more powerful 75mm gun with excellent armor penetration capabilities. However, very few were actually produced for Italian use. Most production went directly to German forces, who operated them during the defense of Italy. It represented what Italian armor development might have achieved with more time and resources. Heavy self-propelled guns. The Semovente da 9053 was an incredibly powerful anti-tank weapon mounted on an M1441 or M1542 chassis. The massive 90mm gun was the same high-velocity anti-aircraft weapon used in fixed installations, adapted for the tank destroyer role. Introduced in 1942, it was completely open-topped, leaving the crew dangerously exposed to artillery fragments and small arms fire. It was a true tank killer, capable of destroying any Allied tank at long range, but production numbers were extremely low. Only about 30 were built. Those that saw service in North Africa and Sicily proved devastatingly effective when properly employed. Armored cars. The Lancia 1ZM was an obsolete but still serviceable armored car, dating all the way back to the First World War era. First entering service in 1915, it featured a distinctive twin-turret design with machine guns in each turret. By World War II, it was hopelessly antiquated, but examples were still in service, used primarily for colonial policing duties in Italian East Africa and Libya, and for light reconnaissance in secondary theaters where modern opposition was unlikely. Next on the list, the Autoblinda AB-40. This was the first of the highly successful AB series of four-wheeled armored cars that would become synonymous with Italian reconnaissance forces. Introduced in 1940, this version was armed with three 8mm machine guns in a small turret. Its excellent all-wheel drive, with both front and rear driving positions, allowing it to reverse at full speed, made it supremely maneuverable in the North African desert environment, where it primarily served. The Autoblinda AB-41 became the definitive version of the AB armored car series and one of Italy's most successful armored vehicle designs. Entering service in 1941, it replaced the machine gun armament with a 20mm Breda automatic cannon, giving it real hitting power against soft-skinned vehicles and light fortifications. Its combination of speed, excellent cross-country mobility, and reliable mechanics made it invaluable for desert reconnaissance work. Both Italian and German forces valued it highly, and it served throughout North Africa, the Soviet Union, the Balkans, and Italy. Moving on to the Autoblinda AB-43. This was a planned upgrade to the successful AB-41 design, intended to mount a much more powerful 47mm gun that would allow it to engage enemy armor more effectively. However, Italy's armistice in September 1943 interrupted production completely, and very few examples were actually completed. Those that were finished mostly served with German forces or the Italian Social Republic. The Lancia Lynch represented Italian reverse engineering at work. This nimble armored car was based directly on captured examples of the excellent British Daimler Dingo scout car. Introduced in 1943, it was small, fast, and designed specifically for reconnaissance missions over difficult terrain. Its low profile and four-wheel steering made it exceptionally agile. Production was limited by Italy's industrial collapse. Next up, the Camionetta AS-37 Sahariana, a dedicated desert raider vehicle. Based on a modified truck chassis but stripped down ruthlessly for maximum speed and operational range, it was specifically developed for the unique demands of desert warfare in North Africa. First appearing in 1939, it proved crucial for supplying forward elements operating hundreds of miles from bases and for long-range reconnaissance patrols across the vast western desert. Italian and German forces both used Saharianas extensively for raiding British supply lines. The Camionetta AS-43 represented an attempt to simplify and improve upon the highly successful Sahariana. Introduced in 1942, it shared the same tactical role: fast, long-range reconnaissance and hit-and-run attacks in the desert theater. Better armed than its predecessor, it arrived too late in the North African campaign to see extensive service before the Axis surrender in May 1943. Trucks and transport vehicles. The Fiat 626 was the standard medium-capacity utility truck of the Italian Royal Army throughout the war. Entering service in the 1930s, it was used everywhere from logistics to troop transport, from mobile workshops to ambulance duties. Known for its reliability on paved roads, it formed the backbone of Italian motor transport, though it struggled badly on rough terrain and in desert conditions, where its civilian truck heritage showed. Next up, the Fiat 666. This was the primary heavy-duty truck used for hauling equipment, ammunition, and heavy artillery pieces. Introduced in the late 1930s, this powerful six-wheeled vehicle was renowned for its robustness and substantial payload capacity, capable of carrying several tons of supplies. Italian logistics units relied heavily on it throughout all theaters. The Lancia 3R was a massive three-axle heavy military truck that became essential to Italian operations. First appearing in 1938, it was used extensively as a prime mover for heavy artillery pieces, towing everything from medium howitzers to heavy anti-aircraft guns. The 3R chassis was often adapted to mount large-caliber anti-aircraft cannons, creating mobile air defense platforms. Its six-wheel drive gave it reasonable cross-country performance. Moving on to the Lancia Ro, an earlier, less powerful version of the famous heavy trucks manufactured by Lancia. While genuinely rugged, its performance was often inadequate compared to German equivalent vehicles during the latter stages of the war. It served primarily in secondary roles once better trucks became available. The Bianchi Milles was one of many standard medium trucks procured by the Italian military during the late 1930s. It was used primarily for light logistical support and transporting supplies along established routes where road conditions were reasonable, serving in rear area duties throughout the war. Next up, the SPA 38R, a reliable medium-duty military truck. Introduced in 1938, it was generally employed for troop transport and hauling general supplies, seeing wide service across all major combat fronts, from North Africa to the Balkans to the Eastern Front, where Italian forces fought alongside Germany. The SPA 35 was a relatively small utility vehicle, roughly equivalent to three-quarter-ton trucks in other armies. This compact truck was ubiquitous throughout Italian forces, providing frontline support, fast liaison services between headquarters, and light cargo transport. Its small size allowed it to navigate narrow mountain roads and crowded urban areas. The SPA Dovunque 35, dovunque meaning anywhere or everywhere, was famed for its all-terrain, all-wheel drive capability. Introduced in 1935, it was specifically designed to handle the poor infrastructure and challenging conditions of Italian colonial territories, from the Ethiopian mountains to Libyan desert sands. It proved invaluable during the campaigns in East Africa and North Africa.
Moving on, the SPA WWII 41. This was an updated version of the legendary WWII concept, entering service in 1941. It offered improved engine power and greater load capacity while maintaining the original's reputation as a rugged, all-terrain workhorse capable of going virtually anywhere wheels could go. The SPA WWII 43 represented the final, heavier iteration of the WWII all-terrain vehicle concept. Introduced in 1943, these vehicles continued the tradition of providing excellent off-road mobility for Italian forces operating in difficult terrain, though by this late stage, production numbers were limited by Italy's deteriorating industrial situation. Next on the list, the SPA TM40, a purpose-built heavy artillery tractor. Entering service in 1940, it was essential for towing Italy's larger field guns and medium artillery pieces across long distances and difficult ground quickly, keeping the guns mobile during the fluid campaigns in North Africa. The Breda 51 was a capable heavy-duty truck manufactured by the Breda Company. While less famous than the Fiat or Lancia models, the Breda 51 provided necessary logistical muscle for the Italian Army's supply lines, hauling ammunition, fuel, and supplies throughout the war. Moving on to the Breda 52. This military truck variant was employed extensively for medium to heavy logistical tasks throughout Italian service. It was known for its reliable engine performance even under adverse operating conditions and difficult maintenance situations in forward areas. Artillery tractors. The Breda 61 was one of the specialized Breda series of military trucks. Designed to handle specific artillery towing and supply roles, it emphasized mechanical reliability over sheer speed, proving valuable in the challenging battlefield conditions Italian forces faced. Next up, the Pavesi P4. This was a genuinely bizarre articulated four-wheel drive tractor that looked unlike anything else on the battlefield. Its unusual articulated design gave it outstanding cross-country performance and exceptional maneuverability. It was mainly used for towing heavy guns or moving large loads across terrain where conventional trucks would bog down completely. The Pavesi TL-37 was a specialized artillery tractor introduced in 1937. Rugged and powerful, it was designed specifically to pull medium field artillery pieces across the challenging terrain of European and North African fronts, from mountain roads to desert wadis. The OM Autocarretta 32 was a widely used medium truck for general transport duties. Introduced in 1932, it played an unseen but absolutely critical role in moving troops, ammunition, and supplies between depots and the front lines, keeping Italian units supplied during extended campaigns. Motorcycles. The Moto Guzzi Alce meaning moose, became the standard military motorcycle used by Italian infantry units and reconnaissance elements. First entering military service in 1939, it was famed for its toughness under brutal conditions and straightforward maintenance that could be performed by unit mechanics with basic tools. Thousands served throughout the war. Next on the list, the Moto Guzzi Super Alce. This was an improved and more powerful version of the basic Alce motorcycle introduced during the war. It provided faster communication and greater mobility for crucial dispatch riders and liaison officers who carried messages when radio communication was unavailable or compromised. The Moto Guzzi Trialce was the three-wheeled derivative of the Alce design. This motorized tricycle essentially functioned as a very small, light cargo vehicle, used for moving equipment, ammunition, and supplies in tight areas where larger trucks couldn't maneuver, urban environments, mountain tracks, and congested rear areas. Moving on to the Benelli 500 VLM. This was another popular and reliable military motorcycle that served alongside the Moto Guzzi models. Used primarily for reconnaissance patrols and carrying messengers across sprawling fronts, it provided Italian forces with a mobile communications capability. Finally, the Gilera Marte.
This robust military motorcycle was designed specifically for the rough demands of wartime service in challenging conditions. It was favored by some Italian units for its excellent power-to-weight ratio and responsive handling.
Miscellaneous vehicles. The Autocannone WW2/35 mounted an enormous 102mm naval gun on a heavy truck chassis. This weapon system was primarily intended for anti-aircraft defense or coastal defense roles, providing immense long-range firepower. However, it was extremely vulnerable to counter-battery fire and air attack due to its size and limited mobility once deployed. Next up, the Autocannone D90/53 su Lancia 3RO. This system mounted an extremely potent 90mm high-velocity anti-aircraft gun on the back of a Lancia 3RO heavy truck chassis. Its exceptional muzzle velocity and armor penetration made it an equally deadly anti-tank weapon when employed in the ground role, capable of destroying any Allied tank at range. Italian forces used these in both air defense and anti-tank roles throughout North Africa and Italy. The Autocannone D75/27 was a standard 75mm field gun adapted to be mounted on a truck chassis, creating a highly mobile fire support unit for rapid deployment. This Porte configuration allowed the gun to be moved quickly and brought into action faster than conventional towed artillery. Moving on, the Autocannone D65/17. This light 65mm mountain howitzer was mounted on the back of a small truck chassis, offering decent immediate fire support for motorized infantry columns operating in mountain terrain where heavier weapons couldn't reach. The Autocannone D100/17 mounted a 100mm howitzer onto a truck chassis, providing Italian forces with a powerful, if top-heavy, mobile assault weapon for short-range bombardment. The high center of gravity made it unstable on rough ground, limiting its tactical employment. Next on the list, the Carro Comando M40, the command version of the M-series tank, usually based on the M13/40 or M14/41 chassis. The main gun turret was either removed completely or replaced with a dummy turret, and the interior space was packed with extra radio equipment, maps, and communication gear for coordinating armored unit movements. These command tanks were essential for controlling Italian armored formations in battle. Finally, the Carro Recupero M-series recovery vehicles. These were dedicated armored recovery vehicles built on various M-series tank chassis, essential for maintaining the operational readiness of Italian armored units. They were responsible for towing damaged or broken down tanks from the battlefield back to repair facilities, often working under fire to recover valuable armor that could be repaired and returned to service. These were the machines that carried Italy's martial ambitions from the deserts of Libya to the mountains of Greece, from the steppes of Russia to the final desperate defense of the Italian peninsula itself. Some were genuinely capable designs that compared favorably with Allied equivalents. Many more were inadequate from the start, products of an industrial base that simply couldn't match the output or technological sophistication of Italy's enemies and even its allies. The Fiat 2000s rumbling into Ethiopia in 1935 were already relics. The L3 tankette crews, nicknamed sardine cans, offered coffin-like protection against weapons that could penetrate their thin armor as easily as tissue paper. The M1340 medium tanks that formed Italy's armored spearhead were outmatched by British Matildas from the very first encounters. Even Italy's best designs, the Semovente assault guns, the AB-41 armored cars, arrived in numbers far too small and far too late to change the trajectory of a war that Italy's industrial capacity was never prepared to fight. But these vehicles carried men nonetheless. Young Italians who climbed into sweltering steel boxes in the African sun, who coaxed failing engines across impossible terrain, who fought with what they were given because their nation demanded it. Tankers who burned to death when their riveted armor failed,
truck drivers who died when their supply convoys were strafed from the air, motorcyclists who carried messages knew they made perfect targets. The vehicles themselves, those that survived, are museum pieces now, monuments to industrial ambition that exceeded capability, to soldiers who deserved better than what their country could provide them. They fought in a war their nation was unprepared for, with equipment often inadequate to the task, and they paid the price that wars always extract from those who fight them. The steel and rubber have long since rusted and rotted, but the cost in blood and broken futures remains, a permanent debt that no amount of historical distance can erase.